Welcome to the Inside Story. I'm Billy Hollowell, and we are diving into a story today that is incredibly heartbreaking. I'm joined by Leonardo Blair of the Christian Post. How you doing today?
I'm great, Billy. Thank you for having me again.
Well, thanks for coming on. And the story that we are dealing with here involves a beloved Tennessee pastor. And this particular preacher was shot. He was shot actually in the mouth in a horrific attack outside of the church. Take us through what happened.
Yeah, Pastor Clemmie Livingston Jr. He's the leader of Zion Field Baptist Church out in Memphis, Tennessee. On February 25th, he was preparing for his morning service when apparently they heard an alarm go off outside the church, and he decided to take a look to see what was going on. And they immediately realized that you know it, there were some people trying to steal a car in the parking lot, and shots went off. He went down, and these individuals took off with one of the cars from the church.
There's so many details in this that are important to unpack, and I want to get into Clemmie Livingston's character, who he is as a pastor, as a human being. But the reporting on this that you've done a number of stories now. It sounds like he ran out and was being relatively, pretty brave in this circumstance of trying to potentially even stop this crime from unfolding. Is that accurate? Take us through some of what we know on those details. Because some people would just, if they hear something like that going on, they might even hide and not get involved. What did he do that day?
Yeah, I mean, apparently, based on what his wife, Gwendolyn Livingston, shared with us, there weren't any words that were exchanged. There wasn't a fight, there wasn't a tussle. He just happened upon the situation, and shots went off. That's the narrative that we're getting right now. I mean, there are other narratives where they're presenting him of perhaps trying to be a hero. I think, based on what his wife has said, and I'm trusting her word on that, is that he just went to take a look, and he really didn't have time to react to too much. He just got shot.
Well, it's actually really helpful to hear you say that, because in these stories, sometimes there is a tendency, of course, people do heroic things, and then there are other circumstances, as you were saying, where he just happened upon this, which actually makes it more disturbing. It's incredibly disturbing in its own regard, the details of this case, but the fact that somebody would go out and happen upon something and then see suddenly somebody is shooting you, it's not a targeted attack. You wonder, why would somebody even do that? Why would those bullets fly out? What advances have police made? I mean, do we know who this was? We obviously know the car was taken, he was injured, but do we have any real details about who perpetuated this crime?
Yeah, unfortunately, the police have still not yet apprehended a suspect. We do know that a member of the church who had a firearm at the time when the attack occurred, they did try to fire back. There was a house across from the church that uh, recorded the incident on camera. But I don't think that has given the police sufficient information yet to arrest anyone.
Well, and I would imagine the community, if that happens in your community, especially the church community, you're shaken, and you want to know, especially when the person hasn't been caught, where they are, who they were, why this happened. How has this impacted the church and the community?
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of shock for the entire community. Just speaking for the family, I mean, they are beside themselves. It's a number of emotions that they have gone through. I remember his son, the Sunday after his father got shot. He talked about the range of emotions that he went through. He talked about, feeling anger. Then he talked about feeling fear. Then he talked about, just the helpless, that feeling of helplessness. He talked about even crying. You're talking about a grown man with his own family, who had this impulse to really defend his father, because to watch his father, he called his father his Superman, and to watch the attack unfold and to see him go down the way he did in a church, where a lot of people expect to feel safe. That narrative, the lack of respect for, God, the lack of respect, reverence for God. So there's the family, the community, has been going through a lot. I know that there's one member of the church who actually talked about how she worked to, after the pastor went down, how she ran over to him and tried to prevent him from bleeding out, until the paramedics arrived. So, just to hear her talking about the trauma of having to deal with that, but then saying, we're determined to keep on praying, we're determined to keep on, going to church, and see what they can do to change things in the community.
Yeah, I mean, and we're watching this happen all over the country. I mean, there's an issue with crime. There's always been an issue with crime since the beginning of humanity, but we are watching upticks in some of this in certain areas around the country, and even in New York City. You and I are both New Yorkers. We're seeing that on the subways. You're having the National Guard come in. You're having authorities double down. So this disregard for life is a much bigger problem than just this particular incident, but it really does cause you to wonder what is happening in the culture when these sorts of things are happening. I want to pivot back to Clemmie Livingston himself. You mentioned his son calling him his Superman. What are other family members saying? What is the family saying about just who he was? I want, when these stories happen, we have a person, we have a name, but it's so easy to just talk about the details and not actually humanize the person. And so I want to do that for a moment just to understand who this person really is.
Hmm. Pastor Livingston, you could tell he was a family man. When you have his grandchildren coming to speak up for him, when you have his children coming to speak up for him, and if you listen to how his wife described him, you know, uh, he he's a man that lives for the church. He lives for the ministry. He believes in, restoring people. He believes in giving people second chances. One of the things that he did mention, he did an interview earlier this week, after he was able to start talking again. He was back in church. Um, he talked about the need for parenting. He and the need for fathers to be leading in the homes, is his analysis of what he sees as a crisis in not just his community but in the nation, where he feels like, many parents, for many reasons, a multitude of reasons, have abdicated their responsibility to raise their children, and that could be as a result of, maybe the culture has not been given parents the opportunity to work and to build their families in the way they were meant to build. But as far as Pastor Livingston has been, mentioned, as what his family and the community has been saying, is that this has been a man who has lived for the ministry.
Absolutely. And that's an important detail here for us to understand. This is also a man who faces other battles. He's currently facing a cancer battle. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because that has actually complicated in some ways, according to reports, his treatment from this gunshot wound.
Yeah, I mean, his family, they mentioned that in passing on top of the whole shooting scenario. They mentioned that. And they haven't really said much, but about where he stands right now in terms of the diagnosis. But yeah, they did mention that he is dealing with bone cancer.
Just as we round this conversation out, how can people be praying for this situation for him, maybe even more broadly for our country as a whole as we deal with these situations far too often?
Yeah, I think this is a major, it's a major concern, where as the pastor said, as the member said, a church is a place where you should feel safe. And every time we have an attack like this on a church, we should be praying. Christians should be praying everywhere. The Bible says we are supposed to pray without ceasing. So, we should try to, get outside of our comfort zones, get outside of, just focusing on our own selves. This Pastor Livingston, he faces, not, it's going to be a long term recovery for him. He has several surgeries left to do. I know he has, in the next few weeks, at least two. And then, depending on how those surgeries, turn out, he's gonna probably have to do a third. So I think one of the things that the community, the wider Christian community, can pray for is for the full recovery of Pastor Livingston. And he also has a GoFundMe. His family established a GoFundMe for him. They could go there and contribute. The stories are on the Christian Post. People can go check that out, and donate, support that church in any way they can. But just keep praying for churches everywhere. Just keep praying for the movement of the gospel everywhere. Keep praying for parents everywhere. So that we can be supported in ways that will build, add more salt and light to the world than anything else today.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time today and talking with us, breaking this story down. Looking forward to having you back again very soon.
Anytime, Billy. Thank you so much for having me.
Everyone else, make sure you head on over to the Christian Post, christianpost.com. Incredible coverage, all the things happening in faith, politics, culture, and so much more. You can also be sure to follow Christian Post on social media so you can keep up with all the stories as they come out. And tune in next week for another episode of The Inside Story. We'll see you then.